welcome to another episode of the Colorful Futures podcast, where we talk about the intersection between intersectionality and careers. I'm your host, Leora Alvarez, career coach and HR consultant. And today we have such a special guest. I'm so excited to have you here, Erika, who is a confidence coach, biz, body, bedroom, just all the things that impact our confidence and our lives. And I'm just really thrilled to have you here as our first guest.
I am so excited to be here, partly because I saw this come into fruition, partly because I got to be inside of it when it was an idea, and now I get to be the first guest, as I should have been. The Capricorn in me is like, absolutely. The Leo rising in me is like 100%. Yes. There's no other option. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I love your audience and I love your community. So I'm very excited to chit chat and to spice things up in their careers.
Yes. And I love you, and I love you for being here, and I love you for being on this journey with me. You have been here since day one. Like, I don't even think I had any revenue. I had 0 sales when we first started working together last summer, or 2 summers ago. It's wild.
You had an inheritance.
Yes.
Dark humor, sorry. You had an inheritance.
Welcome.
And you had an idea and you had some confidence and you made a motherfucking meal out of it.
Yes, exactly. So do you want to give a little bit of background on your work, what you do, and then I would love to hear kind of what led you to where you are now, your career journey?
Yeah, so my job, I always call it a job because I have to mentally tell myself that it's a job because it's so fun, but my job essentially is mentoring and coaching folks in all aspects of confidence. It originally started with body confidence and almost like interpersonal confidence in terms of like who you are as a person and how you view yourself. But very quickly, I realized that confidence kind of overflows into every single aspect of life, whether you think it does or not. And it just kind of bloomed from there. So I work with folks who are specifically in the realm of looking for help in the bedroom. So sex and sexuality. I work with people in business, and I work with people who are just like, looking for body confidence and general confidence within themselves. And as my business flows, as my content flows, sometimes I have more business clients, sometimes I have more body confidence clients, but really, truly, there was different parts of my career where I was connecting with lots of different people and trying to figure out who I wanted to support and who I was best able to support. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, where you live, what size you are, what color of skin you have, what your identity is, and what you do for a job. Everyone struggles with confidence in very similar ways, which is actually kind of cool because there's not many things in the human experience that can be shared among many. So yes, there are lots of differences, but the root of it, like body confidence is body confidence. There'll be things that some people will experience that others won't, but at the end of the day, it's always pretty much stemming from the same spots.
Yes, that is so true. And I love that. I think we've talked before about how you have a niche, but you don't have a niche. And I love that because I can so relate because nothing exists in a vacuum.
It doesn't. And I remember on one of my first coaching calls with my coach, I was like, I'm going to sell confidence. And she was like, just so you know, you are not going to make as much money as the person selling a diet. And I said, just so you know, that just fucking lit a fire under my ass. Thank you. And it was literally the go-getter of my career because I was like, I know that everyone can go out and start a diet. I know that everyone can go out and make more money and try to feel better about themselves. But what happens when you have a baby? What happens when you all of a sudden are diagnosed with a chronic disease? What happens when you lose a limb or your abilities end? Okay. Your relationship with your body is going to look different. What happens when you lose your job? What happens when your partner is hot wiring money from you without knowing, and now all of a sudden you have nothing in your bank accounts when you thought you had 500,000? What happens? So yeah, like confidence is hard to sell and it's hard to market because it's so interlapped and it's so overlayered into so many different parts. But that's what like excites me. That's what turns me on as a business owner. I'm like, okay, I'm going to find a way that these connect and I'm going to make this understandable for you so that you can move through it and not feel like shit about it.
So you posted something to your stories, I think it was yesterday, about how you are like, you just started this group program and you're kind of rediscovering your ability to teach and like leaning into this teacher role. And I find this really interesting because you started as a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how does that feel to like kind of in a very like unrelated but related way come full circle back to owning that teacher role?
Mm-hmm. So the thing I love about like the human existence is that like everything comes to a shock and nothing should come as a shock. So when I was younger, when I was 10, my first job, my first career was, I called it mother's helper. And I gave out pieces of paper on colorful, very Leora branded paper when I was 10. And I printed it out at the library and it said, "Hi, my name's Erika. I'm a helper from your kid's school," because I was helping with the kindergarten class. Like, I love your child so much. Like, if you need anything, I would love to help. I can't babysit yet, but like, if you need someone to play with your kids while you do grocery, or like while you fold your laundry, while you do housework, like, I would love that. I charge $5 an hour for as many kids as you need. I undervalued myself at the time. And that was my first job. And then as I progressed throughout my childhood, I worked at an ice cream store, and then I was a lifeguard, and then I was a children's like daycare person at the YMCA. Then I was all of these things. And so every single job that I've had has been in some sense as a teacher or as a mentor. And so, like I said, I did Zumba instructing. I was a lifeguard. I was a swim instructor. I was a mother's helper. I was a canoe coach as well. I was a camp counselor. Then I started kind of going to school. I went to school for physical health and education, as well as gender equality and social justice. And in that, I was like, I want to be a doctor. That was kind of like my whole thing. I wanted to help people. I wanted to kind of like just like guide people. And I decided not to because of my chronic disease. And it was actually not even my own decision. It was kind of like a led conversation by my dad, who I hated taking his advice, but he was like, "Listen, you don't have to take any other piece of advice from me, but as someone who lives 24/7 with a chronic disease, I just want you to consider what it's going to look like for your future to not only have to care for yourself 24/7, which is really hard, but also be in a job that has not stable hours, that you're going to be caring for everyone else in the exact same part and field and industry that you have your own trauma in." And shockingly, because I hated my dad at the time, I listened to him, and I'm so thankful that I did. So yeah, I wanted to be a doctor. Then I didn't know. Then I was like, maybe I need to be a teacher. And then I was like, I'm going to do research in cancer, and then I'm going to be a lecturer. I didn't. I started working at Freshie, which is like a salad bar and a restaurant, because no one would hire me. I went to Australia because I was like, fuck this shit. Like, I have 2 degrees. I did my thesis. No one cares about me. Like, I can't sell myself. So I went on an eat, pray, love with myself down to Australia, where I nannied for a year. That's where my journey really started, because I was like so far from home for the first time ever. Like, I had traveled the whole world, but like, I don't know if y'all ever been to Burns Beach in Australia. It doesn't get more, like, it doesn't get farther from there. So it was there that I kind of like started finding myself. And then when I got home, I ended up in a nursery, like a preschool, and I was teaching, and I loved it. They were so sweet. They were so cute, but I was there for the staff, and I didn't see it until after I left. But at that time, when I was starting to go on my confidence journey and like really finding myself, I was sharing online, and I was coaching for free in the DMs before I even knew what the coaching industry was. And yeah, I just was sharing my relationship with diabetes and my body and who I was as a person. And after I ended up at the preschool, for some reason, they didn't like the fact that I was like shaking ass on Instagram in my underwear and then going to work the next day and taking care of these kids and teaching them their ABCs. But it's funny because now that I'm out of it and I'm in this role, like, all of my friends at that job were like, "You were not there for the kids." Like, you were great. You can change a diaper and you can have fun. But in reality, like, you were the person that kind of led the staff to think positive and to have a different mindset and to enjoy themselves and to not take things so seriously. And that's when I was like, okay, like, no matter what I've done, I've always been teaching, but I've also always been kind of mentoring and guiding. And yeah, this past 18 months in my business have looked very different than the first 3 years of my career. I think, and I was saying this in my stories yesterday too, like, if someone in corporate came to me and was like, "I'm not fulfilled in my job," I would be like, "Okay, you know this." I'd be like, "Okay, like, is it the actual job? Is it the company? Is it the hours that you're working? Is it who you're working with? Is it in the capacity? Is it the industry?" Like, all of these things, right? Like, I would find a way to be like, what isn't clicking? can we make it work? And if not, like, where are those transferable skills so that you can go and find something that you do fucking love and like stop beating your head against the wall and just allow yourself to do that. But when it comes to like owning your own business, it's a completely different story because it's so deeply attached to who you are as a person and like your confidence in general that my ego completely got in the way the last 18 months of being able to be like, your business grew, but it needs to mature. Whereas like I have matured so much in the last 5 years just from going through like estrangement with my parents and my whole family to being told that I might have cancer and then them being like, psych, it's actually not cancer, like wrong person. Then I was like spiraling from that. Then I started reconnecting with my parents and now I've moved back in with my parents at 31. And yeah, it's a really unique experience to lose not your purpose and passion, but lose that like fight that you have and question everything. And then all of a sudden, yeah, 18 months later, I'm sitting here being like, oh, like what I wanted to do, it doesn't matter if it was confidence, whether it was body confidence, business confidence, sex confidence, whatever it is, like what I want to do is I want to teach and I want to explain and I want to help people understand. And that is like a really big part of my journey now of being like, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I just need to be teaching. And like, that was so big for me because now I'm like, I just need to teach. I can teach dogs if I want to. I could go and teach kids again. Like I can do that, but I need to be in a position where I am learning myself and then using that information and passing it on for greater good.
I so resonate with that. Like I'm like a forever student. I love learning, but I love sharing that with others because I'm like, what is the point of learning and like having these like eye-opening, like mind-opening experiences if we're not passing that on? When I was a kid, my mom's a teacher. She's a late career teacher. And she always told me like, oh, I could see you being a teacher. And I was like, ew, I don't want to be a teacher. Like that's like, no, thank you. And now in my job, right, like as a career coach and a consultant, I'm like, I literally am teaching all the time. So I like somehow found my way in that role anyway. So when I was reading your stories yesterday about like finding your way into teaching, I was just like snaps all around because I can so relate to that. You were talking about how when you were a kindergarten teacher, I think it was, that you were there for the people. And that's kind of what, I don't want to say what kept you in that role, but that's what kept you there.
Me in my role. Yeah. It was not getting handed shit from the children's diapers that they dug out themselves. No, that did not keep me on my job.
Yeah, I'm sure the pay wasn't fantastic either at the time.
No, $16 an hour to raise children.
Yeah.
That ain't even my own. I can't even dress them how I want to dress them. I got to dress them in the... Yeah, so I met with a client and a friend a couple months ago who loves her team, loves the work that she's doing, but she's getting underpaid. And when we were like having this discussion, there was so much resistance to her actually like moving on from that and getting paid what she deserves, like what she rightfully deserves, and be able to actually feel more stable financially, because she was kind of convincing herself of like, oh, well, I don't want to leave my team. My team's so great. They've treated me so well. I love this work, but like, I'm not surviving financially. I'm not getting to where I want to be. But even though she knew that it's like so hard to leave this thing that you feel so connected to. So I'm curious, like what you would say about something like that. Okay, so you know how like 20 minutes ago I was saying like it's crazy because even though we all look different and we come from different parts of the world and we all have different walks, like we all experience the same shit. I have probably had 100 out of my 500 clients go through this. And there are times where I wish I could reach through the computer and like with loving hands, like shake my clients and be like, do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself? Like, do you hear yourself? Because I think, sorry to everyone listening, I'm a hard truth hitter, but that is people pleasing to its core. That is disrespect towards yourself to the core. I think there is so many people who want to be known as good. And I have this deep belief, especially for femmes, women, non-binary folks, like I have this deep belief that when we are born, the like good little girl is like embedded in us from the day we are fucking conceived. And that mentality and that pressure that we put on ourselves to be the good little girl does not go away. And so we see it in who we date. We see it in the grades that we get. We see it in how we were in our classes when we were sitting there being like the goody goody. And then the boys were throwing scissors at the teacher's head. And we were like, oh, can you sit beside Johnny? Like he needs a good little like focus friend. And you're sitting there being like, I have to now babysit this person. And so I think the idea of this like good girl, mentality is like deeply rooted in a lot of us. And then as we get older, if we don't detach from what we believe people think about us, we go into these careers and we care more about the corporations, their money, and people pleasing and being liked than actually having our own back. And I have a really like big connection to the rebel mentality. It actually fucking saved me, I think. And I read this book on my flight to Australia, and my dad gave it to me, and he always is like, I sometimes wish I didn't give you that book, because he's like, you took it a little bit too fucking seriously. But it was the book called like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes.
And I don't remember the book. Straight up, don't remember it. Thank you, ADHD and memory. However, I do remember in that book it talking about how often we put everyone else in front of us and how it's a disservice to who we are and how we feel. And so for clients and for people who come to me and they're like, I love my staff and I love this and I love that and I love that, but like I literally have to live off of food stamps, no shame whatsoever. But they're like, oh, and the government's now cutting me off from this program, or like, oh, I can't afford that. And I'm like, babe, with all due respect, like you deserve more. You deserve a job or a career that doesn't put you in a state of just always pleasing someone. And at the end of the day, it just always comes down to how you're perceived and worrying about being the bitch. Like the other day I said something to a client and I instantly wanted to be like, I don't want to seem like a bitch. And I was like, for what? Standing up for myself? Like, it's one of my clients. I fucking love all my clients, but I was like, girl, you haven't paid in 2 months. And like, I'm usually really chill, but I was like, I need some money because I have my own bills to pay, right? So now I'm paying interest on my credit card. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry to bother you. Do you mind paying that so I can just like pay off my visa and not pay? But my instant thought was, oh my gosh, you're being such a bitch for asking, where it's like, that's your money. Like you're paying now to work, girl, you're paying now to work. And so I would say like, you have to dig deep when you're in a situation of trying to decide whether to go or not. And it's the same in a relationship too. You have to dig deep and ask yourself, like, who is at disservice right now? And it's always, if not mostly, typically you and yourself. And you have to make peace with that too, because that's really hard to sometimes be like, I am keeping myself in this position. Like the government's not going to come and like raise the minimum wage. This multi-million-dollar corporation is not going to be like, you know what, babes, here's a $10,000 raise. You deserve it. So you kind of have to have your own back. And I deeply, deeply, deeply believe that I also learned that through my advocacy for my own diabetes. And it happened all also when I was in Australia, because I had to advocate for myself across the world. But yeah, it's a skill that you need to learn, is self-advocacy.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, since you were talking about like being neurodivergent and being queer and like having a chronic illness, how do you feel like your identity, or like all of these pieces that kind of make up who you are and all these different aspects, have impacted your career journey?
That's a great question. I feel like every individual walks through life experiencing things. Some people experience generational wealth. Lucky ducks. Some people experience the total opposite of like being born into like chaotic and like disorganized households. Some people are born into amazing households and end up with chronic disease. And some people are born with all of these things. And I think for me, I really neglected major parts of who I was. And it was because they were all deeply rooted in this like unspoken shame. So I have type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed when I was 6. When a doctor tells a 6-year-old that your body's not working, you instantly go, 1, am I dying? 2, what did I do wrong? Because none of my other friends are sick. None of my other friends are dying. None of my other friends have to now take 10 needles a day and poke their finger and all these things. Like, what did I do wrong? And from age 6, my whole brain has been, I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong. And okay, you have one experience where you're like, oh, you got the flu. Oh, you didn't pay attention and your friend was sick and you went for a sleepover anyways. So you can blame yourself for that one thing. But when you have a chronic disease that you make over 300 active health decisions every day from, every time your blood sugar is high, low, you feel sick, you feel tired, something didn't work, you took too much insulin, you didn't take enough, you have an opportunity to blame yourself. And you have an opportunity to tell yourself that you're not good enough and that you fucked up and that you are a failure and that you don't know yourself. And then that's just one thing. That's diabetes. Then I had the queerness, and I grew up in a predominantly white conservative town. And I thought like you were either gay or you were straight. And I also like didn't know, that's my favorite thing. I didn't know anyone that was gay until grade 12.
Yeah.
That's
Quotes
so
around
funny. Yeah,
quotes around grade 12.
yeah. For those of you listening, there's a lot of quotes going on here. And I just thought it was like, yeah, you're either gay or you're straight. And I never even asked myself, like, what are you? Because I just was born into this compet community and household and family and environments. And I was a dancer. So I just like never asked myself that. And it wasn't until I was like 24 that I was like, wait a second. I don't think it's normal to like, I just kiss girls when I'm drunk. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was actually like able to be like, oh shit. And so like, even just like neglecting that part is a huge part of my business now and my career and my life now, because I'm like, damn, like I went 24 years not even asking myself, like, is this a possibility for me? And it was funny because when I actually asked myself about the queerness, bitch, I started asking myself about everything. And that's when I started being like, oh, maybe your mental health isn't normal, because I have always been, trigger warning, like, but I just also just speak very freely. Like I have always been suicidal. Like I always was like, I just don't want to fucking be here. And my whole life, everyone was like, oh, it's because your diabetes, it's your diabetes trauma. Like it's a long life, living life like this. And I thought it was that, but then I was also so chaotic, major emotions. I couldn't control it. Like I was just always so busy in my brain. I wanted to like literally pull my brain out of my body most days. And yeah, when I started being like, wait, if I'm potentially not straight, maybe I'm also potentially like maybe this is also not normal to want to KMS every single day. And maybe it's not normal to feel all these things. And knowing that I went like 25 years of my life neglecting a lot of things that would have changed the trajectory of my life. And I try not to dwell, but it is a mourning experience. Like now when I'm in my business, I'm like, everything is a possibility. Like I have to be so open-minded. And I love that, because when I was open-minded about making a relationship with my diabetes, instead of just like literally wanting to kill myself with it, right? Like all of these things, I was like, okay, if all these bad things were happening to me and I like found a way to kind of make a relationship with it and be open to alternative ways with it, like what else is possible? And now I feel like with my business, it allowed me to do that, because I was like, I'm not like stuck in this whole, like, this is what you teach and this is who you are. I'm able to be like, oh, I could probably do this and I could probably do that. And I might actually be really good at this. And it's a little bit tricky sometimes when you're someone that is really good at a lot of things, because then you're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know who I am. And I thought that at first. I really thought I was like lacking confidence in knowing myself. But there's also this like really beautiful thing where you're like able to kind of see the world a little bit more differently and a little bit more open-minded. And you can very quickly tell if something's not for you or not. But being able to be open about it is like the missing piece and like the part that like really ties it together for my business.
I love that you brought in just like this level of being open to like exploring what is going on with your own mind and body and heart and spirit. And I talk a lot about this of just like when you eventually like have that awareness of like, oh, this is how my brain works, or oh, this is like, you know, the interest that I have, or being queer, neurodivergent, or whatever. I found that can release a lot of the shame, because you're like, oh, I'm not actually trying to fit myself into this thing because like I'm not even meant to be there. Thank you so much for hanging out with Erika and I for the first part of our conversation this week. You can catch the rest of our convo next week in part 2. See you then.